Druids can be anything. Animals, a healer, a spellcaster, a necromancer. There's a lot of complexity to the druid, so today we're going to go through everything you need to know about the druid so you can master the master of nature. Let's go! Let me know in the comments what your favorite wild shape form is, and these class guides are designed to teach you the mechanics of a class and everything you need to know to succeed. I'll have a link to that playlist right here for you guys. So playing as a druid is a lot, and there's a lot to sort of think about really. Now, at its basic form, they are a spellcaster that has the wild shape ability. Wild shaping essentially allows them to take the form of a beast, and you can do this a couple of times before you need to short rest to be able to do it again. This comes in handy in a number of ways. You can use this in combat, and every time you take the shape of an animal, you'll have your own health pool as well as your own armor class, and they also have their own abilities, like the bear can roar to sort of taunt, the wolf can howl to give allies movement, the owlbear has like a damaging jump that it can do. There's plenty of different ways that the druid in combat and the wild shaping actually has its elements, but you can also use it outside of combat. You know, you can shape into a cat to get into tiny places, you can burrow into a badger and use that to sort of dig your way into areas that maybe you shouldn't be in. There's plenty of different ways that you can use the wild shape form, but outside of that, the druid is also a very proficient caster in that not only do you have your own unique spells as part of the druid kit, but you also can just be a solid like ranged sort of caster format. And then on top of that, if you wanted to, you can also be a necromancer. So there's a lot to the druid, but let's sort of cover everything I can in this video, and I'll give you a pretty good breadth of sort of hopefully make you choose how you want to play your druid. So we'll start with the races. Now, obviously role-playing considerations here, but the druids have solid proficiencies on their own, and even so, it doesn't really matter too much because you don't need those proficiencies unless you're going to use some sort of a melee, just shillelagh focused druid using that shillelagh cantrip. But for the most part here, you can consider the movement speed if you are using that. You know, dark vision is maybe important if you're staying in your human form. Honestly, you could pick whatever here. The wood elf's probably like maybe the best option because you get a little bit of extra movement speed. You also get dark vision. It's also kind of lore accurate, I guess, in a way. Like, just, you know, when I think of druids, I think of wood elves, but yeah, really you can go anything in terms of races. Skills are all about wisdom for the druid, so animal handling, insight, medicine, perception, and survival. And for your backgrounds, acolyte, folk hero, outlander, and guild artisan are the ones that also have wisdom skills, but it's entirely up to you in terms of your background. Ability points here, you really want to max out your wisdom as it's your spellcasting modifier, and then I'd probably be trying to get your dexterity and your constitution as high as possible. Constitution obviously for health, and dexterity for your initiative and your armor class, but they're the sort of the three that I would focus on. Now, subclasses. So at level 2, you'll pick one of the 3 subclasses. The Circle of the Land leads into the mage aspects of the kit. You get natural recovery, so once per day out of combat, you can replenish your spell slots, sort of like a wizard, and this is definitely just like the most sort of typical spellcaster class, a bit more of a defensive focus maybe if you wanted to lean into the support elements of the druid's kit. The Circle of the Moon leans into wild shape, especially combat wild shape, so you can now cast the action combat wild shape as a bonus action to assume the force of a beast while you're actually in combat rather than it being an action, and you also get additional wild shape forms as a Circle of the Moon druid. Circle of the Spores is a necromancy themed subclass where essentially you will be staying in your human form and casting spells, but you also have access to a bunch of new things compared to some of the other subclasses. So the main one here is Halo of Spores, which is a reaction that deals necrotic damage, and it's super rare in this game where you can actually just trigger your reaction in your turn. So if you think about it this way, right, like every time you make a combat turn, you have an action and a bonus action, and here as well with Halo of Spores, you can actually make your reaction as well. So essentially you're taking 3 actions in your actual combat turn, but also keeping in mind if you're using that reaction, you can't use your reaction for other things. But you've got plenty of things that are all based around that necromancy, like being able to bring up undead and then have them spawn their own undead, and it's all based around that, as well as the symbiotic entity, which will grant temporary HP as well as bonus necrotic damage while it's active. It's a very interesting subclass that's very unique if you wanted to play some sort of like play style a little bit different in the druid sort of setup. So how do you pick between these 3? At a high level, the land is probably a support, defensive focused druid. The moon is definitely a wild shape combat focused druid. You'll definitely be in some sort of a animal form during combat. And the spores is definitely an offensive caster with those like necrotic abilities that you also can sort of tap into. Feats are a little weak for the druid because the druid's a weird class because you are sort of in a weird like hybrid between different archetypes. So generally as a druid, probably for most of your feats, you'll probably just take the ability Improve improvement, because when you're in like an animal form, you can't really, you're not using a weapon or any sort of other feats, but you will keep your ability points. So increasing those, whether that be for your constitution or dexterity or something like that, is definitely valuable to have, especially your wisdom as well for casting. You can also do maybe like, say, if you want to be more of a caster focus, you could get something like the Elemental Adept and focus on, say, cold damage, as Elemental Adept will remove enemies' resistances. But yeah, Druid doesn't have anything that I would say is a must grab in terms of feats. Ability improvement, and in getting your ability improvement, possibly to get your wisdom to 20 or increasing your dex or constitution, is definitely the route that I would go. For the best spells and cantrips, Shillelagh we touched on a little bit earlier, but essentially this allows you to imbue your melee weapon to use your spellcasting modifier, so wisdom with some extra damage plus bludgeoning damage. It's a great cantrip to use if you're using some sort of melee damage with your druid. Moonbeam is a fantastic spell that allows you to like control an area, a bit like Cloud of Daggers, in that you'll place that down, enemies in that area will take damage, but also you can move it as a bonus action. So if the enemies move out of the way of it, you can actually move it back. You've also got all your healing spells like Healing Word and that sort of thing as a druid. Heat metal is great because so many enemies have metal weapons and you can heat that up. Not only will that damage them, in a lot of cases they'll actually drop that weapon as well. So you've got options there, and plus all of the typical damage spells like your ice storms and that sort of thing. Plus if you're going the spore druid, then you've also got those necrotic spells and the reactions that you get access to, like Symbiotic Entity and Halo of Spores, that you can use as well. So plenty of flexibility for the druid's kit, and you do have a lot of spell slots regardless of your subclass, so you can definitely change between them, and it change your spells that you have active as well, because you do have access to that spell book. Some tips for playing the druids. Now these guys they're not really your primary damage dealers, they're not really your primary healers in some cases, they're also not really your tanks in some cases, because they can kind of do everything, which makes them one of the funnest classes in the game, because you can adapt to those scenarios that you need. So in some fights, maybe even though you're not a moon druid, maybe you actually need a bit more melee damage, or you need some sort of a frontliner. You can shape into a bear, and by the way, you can do this before combat actually starts, so you don't have to waste that action even as a moon druid, right? Obviously you get the bonus action to wild shape and combat wild shape, but you can do this at any time as long as you're not in combat, and obviously you can do it in combat as well. Now there are the other forms, like as mentioned, how the badger can burrow underground, or the cat can be a little stealthy and also distract enemies and sneak into little holes. Then the raven can also fly. So make sure you're playing around with these different forms and seeing different ways you can interact with the sandbox in Baldurs Gate 3, because that's one of the best parts about the druid's kit, is these things that you can also do. When you are wild shaped as well, they also have their own health pool, which is an extension of your own. So once the wild shaped animal is defeated, you'll just switch back to your human form. So don't worry like too much about that. Say if you get defeated in your bear form or whatever, you'll just go switch back to your human form. But obviously if your human form gets defeated, then maybe that's an issue that should worry you. But for the most part, you don't have to worry too much about that. You can just shift back, say via your bonus action if you're a moon druid or something like that. But you've also got access to all those spells, so just keep that in mind. But that's sort of everything you need to know at a high level for the druid. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.